Tottenham Hotspur just cannot catch a break. That is another major blow, with Maddison looking like he's going to be out for a long time in today's match against Newcastle United. Now look, the injury looked really bad. So we are in big trouble for that number 10 spot. But before we get more into that later, I am going to break down some of what happened in that Newcastle game just to see how we're evolving, because things did change, especially in the defensive shape yet again. Now, if you didn't see the previous videos, I've done them, I think for Reading, and I've done them for the Arsenal game now. And it seems to be game from game, Frank is tweaking little things, mostly from the defensive side of things and in set pieces. And there's been another tweak yet again today, and that is to do with our defensive shape against Newcastle. And the main thing that I noticed is that we went extremely defensive when we were in our own box. So this was the starting 11, as you can see here. This is kind of how it laid out, and we're going to get a little bit more into it later why I've laid out like this, because what we've seen in recent Frank games is Bentancur here. It could be Gray, could be Sarr, could be Bergvall, and then we've had a sort of number 10 in front. That's usually what we've seen. But actually, in fact, this game was a little bit different because Gray was everywhere. He was brilliant today. I think he was one of the standouts for me, alongside Danzo and a couple of others as well. Like Porro was fantastic. I think Bentancur's really growing into that 6th role at the moment. Obviously, Palhinha has been confirmed by Spurs this evening, so that's one to look forward to see if he can do there. But I do honestly believe that Bentancur is growing very slowly into this role, so probably will be a rotation option with Palhinha for that position. But Gray was definitely more of a number 8 today, as opposed to just a DM sitting or standing next to Bentancur, that is, and just kind of shuffling as we've seen in previous matches. Gray was up the pitch here at times with Sonny up top. He was all the way back in defence. But this is the main thing what I was saying, where we've switched up a little bit, because when we've defended, we've previously defended in a 4-4-2 shape. We did that a lot against, the first game against Reading, against the sort of quote-unquote lesser teams. Not to put them down, but that's what we were doing. We were effectively defending in a 4-4-2, quite compact, with the attacking midfielder being one of the two and the striker being the other one. Now, we did resort to this when we were in the middle of the pitch, and this is where I think Frank talks about the phases, like where we're on the pitch determines what we do and what our actions are. So when we were defending, I would say in the middle of the park, we would defend in this way. Now, there were definitely occasions where this shape altered slightly. An example of this was Son just wasn't able to go up and down the whole game because I just don't think he's fit. And obviously, I mean, again, I'll get into this later, but this was obviously Sonny's last game. He was leading the line as captain. It was so emotional. I've already done a video on my channel, like saying goodbye to Sonny. So if you haven't watched that, check that out. It's on my channel. I think it's like my most recent upload. It's so sad. So I really don't want to go too much into that in this video in particular, because I think I'll just start crying. It was a very emotional watch at the end. But as I was saying, there were occasions where obviously Sonny would be out on this left-hand side, and sometimes he just didn't quite have the legs. Not all the time, because he did do it a lot, but sometimes he didn't quite have the legs to sort of come back into the shape. So what would happen on occasion was Son would sort of press from here, and maybe Sarr would drop a little bit deeper. Maybe Gray moved over a little bit and Sarr here, or like vice versa, just depending on. That would happen sometimes, not all the time. This is the general shape when Newcastle have the ball in these sort of middle of the park areas, which is standard. We've seen that for pretty much every game so far. But where this differed today is when we got deeper towards our box. Whenever Newcastle had the ball in, let's say, in these sort of areas, out far wide on the right or on the left with Harvey Barnes, we would go to a back 6, sometimes a back 5, and I'm going to show examples of it from the game. But what would happen is, let's say the ball's out on the left side like this. What would happen a lot is obviously Porro is near the Newcastle player that's on the ball. Bentancur actually came in a few times, and I think more often than not was following Joe Linton and marking him. Let's just give a random. Let's just say this player's on the ball here. This is Joe Linton. Bentancur would shadow him a fair bit in these sort of scenarios, but in general, he would sort of slot into this space. Romero there, Danzo there. Gray slotted in between Danzo and Davies, and then you had Son, Sarr, Johnson with Tell in front. So we'd almost have this 6-3-1 formation. Sometimes it was a 5-4-1. So like I said, sometimes maybe if you had Joe Linton sort of drift a little bit further into the middle, Bentancur would go back there and obviously Johnson across here. So we would sort of have a 5-4-1. That would happen on occasion. But there were a lot of times we actually sat 6 at the back, which is something I'm pretty sure Newcastle have done a lot too when they've come up against good teams. So we almost seem to be replicating their defensive style a lot. That was the major difference that I saw from this game compared to other games, is just when we come up against a team that is really strong. I think of their midfield. You've also got Gordon that was playing up front in this game, who's obviously very tricky, very technically gifted, very fast. I think because he's running around a lot, I think we just wanted to be really defensively assured whenever the ball was out wide in these sort of scenarios. And it would be the same if it was out here. But yeah, it's wild. And I'll give you an example now because it was really weird to see in real time. So there you have it. I was not making it up. And to be fair, the ball was actually quite far over this way, but I'm pretty sure it was already on the left-hand side and got played across. But this is a prime example of, look, Porro, Bentancur, Romero, Danzo, Gray, Davis. 6 at the back, 3 in the middle, and then Tell kind of leading the press from the front. And then this is that same, I think it's from that same, yeah, it's from that same moment, a few seconds on, the ball's gone back round to the left side to Harvey Barnes, and you can see clear as day, Porro's heading across, Johnson's heading across, then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all really compact and in the box. And you know what? It worked for the most part. Obviously, Harvey Barnes got a goal. I thought it was a great finish. I saw a lot of people complaining about, well, I'll say a lot. There was a few people on Twitter complaining about the fact that Kinski should have done better. Look, he had the ball in this position here. He drove across goal here. Porro was sort of kind of cutting the near post. So any sane person would think that Barnes is bending this to the right-hand side of the goal. But he actually hits it with so much power. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand. He hits it with a lot of power, kind of like a reverse shot, almost near post. And yeah, I think you'd struggle to find many keepers that would get there to that position. So I don't blame Kinski one bit. It was a brilliant goal from Harvey Barnes to equal it up. But yeah, it was just mad to see this sort of play in real time. And like I said, sometimes Bentancur would step up and follow Joe Linton if he was, rather than him being in these attacking positions, if he was like in the middle section here, then Bentancur would step up, but Gray would still sort of form the back line in a back five. Equally happened on the other side. I think Gray was very tight to Bruno Guimaraes a lot of the game. So maybe sometimes he stepped up and Bentancur stayed in and it was a 5. So we sort of altered between the 6-3-1, 5-4-1 defensive shape as opposed to the normal 4-4-2 that we saw in some of the early games in pre-season. The next thing I want to highlight is the fact that Danzo is an absolute monster. He was playing left centre-back today. Look how high he is here. Like I said, our shape was a little bit different today. Obviously, you've got the 2 in sort of Sar and Tell usually were pressing. You've got Sonny out on the left side. Like I said, it was difficult for him to track back. Gray was sticking to Bruno like glue, and I'm going to get onto that in a second. But first, I want you to notice how high Danzo is. Danzo is ahead of Bentancur in this situation, because what would happen a lot, he was very aggressive in following Gordon whenever Gordon stepped further, I guess closer to his defence. So if Gordon sort of drifted forward to try and collect the ball deep, because obviously he's not a natural striker that's just going to stick on the last man. He's looking to collect the ball and create opportunities. Danzo would follow him and stick to him like glue. And that's the reason we got the goal at the beginning, was because of the fact that Danzo was really aggressive in these sort of areas, won the ball back around here and played through Johnson. And actually, it might have been a little bit further up. It was about here, I think. Played through Johnson. Johnson managed to get a goal. All right, it took a deflection. But the aggressiveness from Danzo is what I love to see today. And he was a beast. There was only one moment where Gordon got around him in the box. Apart from that, I thought he was defensively solid. Headed clearances. He was aggressive, front-footed, which is something that we normally see from Romero. Which was nice to see that Romero in this game was actually, for the most part, the more reserved one. We know Romero loves to step up and tackle players, but in this game in particular, it was Danzo doing a lot of the dirty work and pressing up on Gordon whenever he sort of got deeper into his own sort of halfway line positioning. So that was just really cool. I just wanted to point out that I thought he was great today, especially playing on the left side when he's not left-footed. Fantastic. So that was Danzo. Now let me talk to you about Gray, who I thought had a really good game. He was absolute workhorse in this match. But as I said right at the beginning, when we are building up, what we're used to seeing so far under Thomas Frank is a 3-2-5 shape. Ignore the names because this is obviously not what the previous matches were, but this is what we're used to seeing when we're building up from the back, when we're a little bit further ahead of the goalkeeper, is this sort of 3-2-5 shape. As we saw in some previous games, we did tweak this slightly, especially against Arsenal, where it was looking a little bit more like a 4-2-4 because we wanted to be a little bit more assured. So the fullbacks were pushing up, and in fact, Vicario against Arsenal was almost acting like a third centre-back. So actually, really and truly, it was sort of a 5-2-4 against Arsenal, including the goalkeeper. And to be fair, Kinski did also do this a lot today because he is fantastic. His distribution is brilliant. So a lot of the times in this game in particular, we did have moments where maybe the ball was here with Kinski. We were building with a 3. Okay, Porro was a little bit out wide. Dave was a little bit out wide. Now, typically, we've seen our 2 central midfielders, defensive midfielders, basically work as a pair like this. And our attacking midfielder would kind of be further up with the strikers. Where it was a little bit different today is we were kind of building up in a 4-3-3, to be honest with you, because Gray was actually behaving more as a number 8. This is what we saw a lot in our build-up. If it started from the back, Kinski, Danzo and Romero either side. Obviously, Porro and Davis still sticking with the width. Bentancur, for a lot of this match, was actually acting as a lone DM. There were a lot of occasions where he would be here and we would see Gray and Sarr sort of in line for the most part high up the pitch. So Gray wasn't doing this typical 6 defensive mid role that we've seen so far from our double pivot. We actually looked more like that Bentancur was playing as like a lone anchor in midfield, which is I found very interesting because this is very typical of what we saw under Postecoglou. Okay, naturally under Postecoglou you had your inverted fullbacks. Ignore that for now. In terms of just the midfield, that is kind of how a midfield would look like under Ange. So it's interesting to see that we actually did that today against Newcastle when building up with sort of Bentancur in the middle by himself. Here is an example of that. We've got Danzo currently on the ball. This is when we're further up the pitch and obviously naturally Kinski can't be involved in play as much. So we've got Danzo up high on the pitch, Mera there. Pelro's not really super far out wide. I mean, you've got Davis is hugging the touchline a lot more. Bentancur by himself in the middle. Gray further up, almost in line with Sarr, which he was doing a lot. But obviously we've got Danzo on the ball now. Ball gets played into Bentancur in the middle. And like I said, usually we would have our other defensive midfielder, in this case, it's Gray. We would normally have Gray in this sort of position here. But look how high up he is. Gray and Sarr are playing in behind the midfield of Newcastle. I reckon Frank has done this because we know Newcastle have an extremely strong and aggressive midfield. Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes, usually Tonali. Very, very aggressive midfield. So I think in our potential build-up today, we were trying to bypass that midfield because if we try to drive through them, we're going to get bullied, we're going to get beaten. So I think we had a different setup today to sort of bypass Newcastle's midfield, and a lot of our play was actually coming from down the side where Porro was. So you can see here, Bentancur picks up in the middle. He's bringing it to this right-hand side now. He's got Porro with him. Looks to turn, but actually makes a pass towards Porro. And then Porro sees a ball, an opportunity, a massive gap in behind the fullback for Johnson to run onto. Look how high Gray... Actually, you can't see. Sorry, let me move it that way for you. Look how high Gray is. Gray, Sarr, Tell, Sonny, Johnson. There's your 5, but both of our midfielders are doing it rather than a fullback joining forward because Davis is not very attacking. Porro is, but he was being quite defensive today to try and nullify Harvey Barnes. And then simply, ball plays over to the top. Johnson's running through. All of a sudden, you've got 1-2 in loads and loads of space. We've completely bypassed Newcastle's midfield. Unfortunately, Dan Burn comes across and tackles Johnson. To be honest with you, I don't think Johnson does a very good job in this specific situation. As soon as he's got the ball under control here, a ball needs to be played across to Tell or Sonny running into the back post. But we are currently outnumbering them. Look, 5 against 4. I think Johnson just takes a poor touch and Dan Burn is able to tackle him. But look at the open space that Tell is in. So that's just kind of showing how we're actually building up differently in this match. Tailoring to the opposition. Bypassing Newcastle's midfield. Playing it long, out wide, using the width, and having Bentancur as a lone DM. We played very, very differently in this game than what we have done in the previous match against Arsenal and before that against your Luton and Reading. But that brings me back onto the man himself, Archie Gray. He was sticking to Bruno like glue a lot of the time. So you can see him here. He's gone right up tight to him. He was, like I said, not your typical This wasn't a typical double pivot from what we've seen in the images before. He was following, sticking with him because he's brilliant. Bruno Guimaraes is a brilliant player. Not only is he strong, he's a fantastic progressor of the ball as well. I think he ranks I think he's the third or second highest sort of defensive midfielder in the league, only behind Caicedo for progressive passes. And yeah, he's a fantastic player. So we basically used Gray to the max here. All right, started to drift away slightly now that the ball was on the left-hand side, because again, like we were saying before, there was every chance we might have to fill in that back six. But the ball gets back round and Gray is back on to Bruno Guimaraes, who's playing a ball out wide. Now, this is an example where it didn't quite work out for Gray. I think he almost was attached to Bruno a bit too much, but there were plenty of examples throughout the match where he was just stuck to him, but then would drift off of him when he needed to defend as a centre-back. But this scenario, the ball goes out wide from Bruno Guimaraes. This isn't great defending from us. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I like the fact that Johnson's come back to help in this sort of scenario because he sees that no, not everyone's here. Davis has been dragged out. Sonny's had to help out, but he's obviously covering the man on the left here. Where this area here, this massive gap, is where Gray filled most of the game. Most of the game, he's filled in those positions. But because he was told to mark Bruno for a lot of this match, I think he got stuck to him in this scenario a little too much. And that meant that there was a massive gap for them to turn into. They were driving forward. And luckily, the ball just escapes Gordon in this situation and we're able to clear. But there's a very, very dangerous chance. If that ball gets whipped to the back post, Joe Linton's free there to tap in, head in. Maybe it find its way to Gordon or whoever's on the edge here. I think that's Target, is able to have a go on goal. So I think maybe we'll just caught a little bit sleeping there. It's only the 8th minute in, that's fine. But all in all, I just want to praise Gray's work rate because he was fantastic at defending in the this is the only scenario where it didn't work, which is why I wanted to highlight it. But for the most part, he was defending in the 6 or the 5 when he needed to. When we were further up the pitch, he was playing as like an attacking midfielder and he was also marking Bruno high up the pitch. So I just wanted to highlight just how good he was in this game, in my opinion, for the first half at least anyway. Another player that did well, Porro. I think his defending has come leaps and bounds to what we've seen before. Tell, striker, I've said this many times, I don't think Tell's a striker in my opinion. What I will say is his link-up play was actually pretty decent. There was a lot of combinations that he had with Sonny out on the left-hand side and Johnson on the right-hand side, to the point where that's how he got through on goal, one-on-one. I think his link-up play is good. I just, the shooting, the decision-making when it comes to the shooting has been pretty poor. So if you didn't watch, he was complete. And when I say one-on-one, there wasn't a player for 20 yards behind him. One-on-one with Pope. And he tries to do a big step over to try and fake Pope. In credit to Pope, he didn't buy it at all. He stood his ground. He tries to, and then Tell tries to slot it in the bottom right corner, and Pope saves it. So credit to Pope, to be fair, for not biting at that step over. Unfortunately, I want my striker in that scenario slotting a one-on-one all day long. I genuinely think that's to be the bare minimum. So he definitely needs to work on that. I don't think it was all doom and gloom. Like I said, I think his link-up play was really good. He played a brilliant pass out to Sonny at one point during the game. I just don't think he's a number 9. I think he's better out wide. He's got the technical ability to be better out wide, drifting into the middle and having shots on the edge of the area. I don't think he's a number 9. I don't think it works, in my opinion. All in all, though, for the rest of the game, I mean, the second half was a little bit drier. I think it was quite good defensively from both sides. I think we kind of went man for man with Newcastle because obviously we were defending with 5 or 6 at some points. They were defending with 5 at the back when they got closer to their box at some points as well. I think it was a very evenly contested game, especially because, again, we struggled in that final third to create clear-cut chances yet again. So I think 1-1 was a completely fair result in this match. We said goodbye to Sonny, which again was super, super emotional. I don't want to get emotional again in this video. I've already done that in a previous one, so I'm going to move on from that moment. But again, thank you so much, Sonny. You've been an absolute legend of this club. And we're hopefully, if he has like a testimonial or when the MLS has like a winter break, it'll be nice for him to come back so we can have a proper send-off in the stadium in maybe like December or January, whenever they break up. So hopefully that happens. But yeah, I wish him all the best on his journey, and no doubt he's going to smash it out there, and hopefully see him at the World Cup as well. But we move on to other more distressing matters. And that was James Maddison's injury. Now, this one looked really bad, if I'm being honest with you. I can't remember who he collided with. I might have been Alanga. I don't remember. I think they all both went towards the ball. They seemed to sort of like clip each other, and then he sort of hobbled off. And as you can see here, he sort of hobbled towards the touchline here, was calling across to the bench saying instantly, nope, need help. And he drops to the ground and looked like he was in so much pain. Like he was almost on the verge of tears. I think, in fact, he might have been. Unfortunately, like I said at the beginning of the video, Frank has confirmed that is the same knee that he's just had injured, that's had it set back. It could be an ACL injury. We haven't had confirmation yet, but at the moment, it's looking really bad. It's potentially season ending if it's a bad ACL tear. So we're going to find out more. Unfortunately, that does mean that we need to press on and sign a number 10, which isn't ideal because I think we were looking for one anyway. I think apparently we're looking for one that sort of plays as a 10 and a left wing, a bit of a hybrid. I think unfortunately now, if Maddison is missing for the rest of the season, and then you've got Kulusevski as well, who's probably not returning until about November is what people have estimated. Hopefully it's sooner. It might be sooner, but the estimates have been November. We're going to be missing a number 10 for a long time. And I know Frank likes to tweak his tactics. Maybe you could make it work with Sarr, Gray, Berval, but unfortunately, we just don't have that midfielder that can unlock great passes, unlock defenses, which is what Maddison does so well. On his day, he is a fantastic player. I think, unfortunately, with the injuries and now this major injury, we've got a big hole to fill. The problem is we're running dry at the moment. I mean, Eze looks like he's favouring Arsenal or staying at Crystal Palace, but closer to Arsenal. Xavi Simons looks like he just wants Chelsea, which I'd love us to hijack that because he does the 10 and left wing, literally 50-50 throughout last season. He played both, but that probably isn't going to happen. Morgan Gibbs-White's obviously off the cards now. We're very quickly running out of options that are like proven. There's obviously, you've got your McAtee from Man City. You've obviously got, Harvey Elliott is a sort of 10 right wing for Liverpool. They played him right centre mid, but he has played on the right wing before, just not when Salah's involved. But you're taking risks. These players are probably still going to cost a decent amount of money, and you're taking a big risk on them. Whereas now that Maddison could be out for a long time, I genuinely think we need a proven, ready-made number 10. There were recent links earlier to Enzo Milo, who could be a good option. I think we wanted him as well as just having Maddison, obviously, before he got injured. Whether we can have Milo as the attacking mid throughout the whole season, I don't know. I don't know him that well to know whether he could last and be a good enough option for the whole season. Paquetá, I thought would be a brilliant replacement for Morgan, like an alternative to Morgan Gibbs-White. Again, are West Ham going to sell us another one of their key players now that he's been cleared of his cleared by the FA for his betting charges? Surely they're not going to sell us another key player in this window as well as Kudus. So I don't think that happens. There aren't many options left. I think Morgan Rogers ticks everything that Frank would want in that sort of player. Are Villa going to sell him? Probably not. At least it's going to have to be close to like 90 mil, and I just don't see that happening either. Yeah, so unfortunately, I think we're going to have to dig deep in the market and soon, because ideally we needed a winger or a winger/striker and now a number 10 before the season starts, which is only 2 weeks away. So yeah, a lot of work to do. I think as much as there were some positives in this game about our defensive structure and nullifying most chances from Newcastle, not all. And naturally, this was mainly a farewell game for Sonny anyway. I think we're going to see a more competitive match on Thursday against Bayern Munich. But yeah, losing Maddison is a huge blow. And now saying goodbye to Sonny, we've got a lot of work to do. But yeah, if you've watched the match, let me know what you think about how Frank is changing his tactics game from game. Do you like the tactics? Where can we improve? And who would you sign to replace James Maddison? All right, that's going to be it from me. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.